If you don't have a man, you ain't nothing.
Good women are dead. Evil bitches, rise up!
Run, 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 that's all you do. You're doing the same old thing. You never do nothing new.
One half is arguing that women are like substandard, not really human on equal pairing. And the other is arguing that like they don't like me back.
Sure. Yeah. And I also think that, there's very much different levels of heteropessimism that people can be expressing. And I think that's kind of maybe where some of the disconnect of all of this comes from is that a lot of people took it as like, oh, if I'm one of these women who is shouting from the rooftops that like I love men, I want to be with them, but I can't find somebody who who wants to do this with me. I can understand why somebody like that might look at this article and be like, well, what is she talking to me for? Like this, I'm not the Andrew Tate here. And they'd be completely right to think that. However, like there is a very large vocal set of people online who, are kind of expressing more, 4B type attitudes, more of unfollowing, other women online when they get a boyfriend or, things of that nature. And while, again, to reassert the point that misogyny and misandry are not the same thing, I think that when we look at what the end product is, for people on an individual level, by aligning with either of those ideologies, it's the end point is really more time spent angry online, and that's where the similarity between the two lies.
Welcome to the show. Welcome. Thank you guys for tuning in one more time. Hit the like button, please. Like, share, and subscribe. Do all the things. If you want to support the show, click the link in the chat. You can hit me up on buymeacoffee.com. You can buy me a coffee of any size. And I'm going to get right into tonight's discussion. And I was listening to a lot of this earlier today, and I found this incredibly fascinating and really enlightening too. I don't even have like any personal criticisms about the two women in particular who are gonna we're gonna listen to them for pretty much the entirety of the show tonight, because I want to comment on almost this whole thing that they put out, because it really was a great conversation. That one, excuse me for falling into a little bit of confirmation bias, but they actually did confirm at some point, at least they confirmed, they're going to get to it, but they talked about certain ideas that I have noticed myself, and that there are just certain like structural realities that men and women are dealing with right now in terms of like forming relationships and romance, quote unquote. And it's something that's almost beyond any individual man or woman. But that being said, though, they actually highlighted a lot of things in this particular podcast that I think is very much worth commenting on. And so we're just gonna jump right into tonight's show. Hit the like button for me, y'all. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Let's jump right into it.
We're MAGA. All right, faithful. We are back with another episode of Bad Faith Podcast. We have returning within the last 6 months, because she's writing articles so hot, we can't not opine. Magdalene Taylor, she is a writer and sex cultural critic at Playboy. She's a senior editor there. She has just set the internet aflame with her viral New York Times take, "There's nothing wrong with wanting men." Welcome back to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Now, right away, right off the bat, let's just take a quick, brief moment to notice that what sparked this whole thing is that liberal women have taken to the New York Times, of all places, to declare in the affirmative that there's nothing wrong with wanting men. Which would imply that there's been a general energy or trend towards not wanting men, or at the very least, not liking men. And now they've gotten to the point, they've been pushed so far into the corner that they have to say, you know what? There's nothing wrong with being a woman who likes men, or a man, all right? Not even all of them, just this one guy that she likes, all right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's how far we've fallen. We have to declare, like we have to scream from the mountaintops effectively, that there's nothing wrong with heterosexual relationships, all right? It's in fact healthy and quite positive.
All right, so this got a lot of flack, in part because it just the timing of it was a little bit less than ideal, coming out during Pride Month and initially being titled something along the lines of like, it's okay to be straight.
Yeah, something like that. I will say, okay, it came out the day before Pride Month. Also, still not ideal. Still not ideal. And yeah, they did some kind of like A/B testing on headlines, and one of them was like the regrettable, being straight is great, actually, or something like that. Which the whole thing really, set me up for a shitstorm.
I mean, it is though, right? Is it not? I don't understand why that would like set you up for any problem whatsoever. It's it's baffling to me. But I mean, I'm not even going to get into it. Don't you guys do it in the chat either. But we're not saying that doing all that other stuff isn't great. No matter how I feel about it, honestly, I'm not saying it. But being straight is great. No? Put a 1 in the chat, guys, if you agree with her problematic, apparently, statement that being straight is great. Put a 1 in the chat if you agree with her problematic statement that being straight is absolutely, positively straight. Wouldn't want it any other way. I wouldn't change it for the world. Not only is being straight good, right? Not only is being straight great, but being a straight man is amazing, right? Being a heterosexual male is phenomenal. Now, I'm not saying being anything else is not phenomenal. I'm going to leave other people to make that declaration or that judgment. I want to just declare. I want to declare that being a heterosexual male is marvelous. It's immaculate. It's almost godlike. It really is. It is almost godlike. You ever felt like Thor or one of them motherfuckers like that? It's almost godlike. That's all I'm saying.
Neither of those things were my decision, to be clear.
Fair enough. So we're going to table that criticism. You've already addressed it. I saw you also did like a response video on your Instagram where you kind of were like, that was regrettable and not my choice, and mea culpa, I would not have chosen that. So we're going to put that to the side. So tell us what this article is about, if it's not about sort of defending the value of heterosexuality.
Yeah. So the article is about how there is a pervasive sense of hetero-pessimism in the culture right now, which is a sort of fatalistic attitude towards heterosexuality and the state of being straight. This, idea that the tension between men and women right now is sort of in a state of disrepair, that heterosexuality and straight relationships no longer serve straight men and women, and that a lot of us should just give up and would be, better off alone. I am trying to argue in this piece that I think that the conditions of being a heterosexual right now are not as bad as they seem. I think that a lot of us are getting swept up in this hetero-pessimistic movement, and that if we zoom out a little bit, we would see that it's really not that bad of a time to be straight if we have the right attitude about things.
All right. So as I'm sure you're aware, I think some of the pushback has been that some of the pessimism isn't following vibes, right? It's not downstream from articles that are being written about hetero-pessimism, but the articles are being written because they're based on the experiences of people in the dating market who have come to the position of pessimism because they have not been especially successful. And that
and shout out to Red Illusion. You make some of the most perfect, awful comments. Like they're perfect in their awesomeness at times. But this is a very spot on comment, Red. Hetero pessimism as opposed to homo optimism, which is the very literal observation of like the state of affairs right now. And that I think LGBT culture is having a moment unlike any other in history right now. whereas heterosexual relationships are on the decline and have hit a bottom, have hit a bottom unlike any other moment in history. And it's interesting that there seems to be a kind of inversion principle at play where the more one goes up, the more the other goes down.
There's something that's rational about heteropessimism. And then I've heard this as well from women in particular. I talk more to women. I'm not saying that men don't feel this way as well, but that there's a sense of self-preservation in heteropessimism where you say, I'm just kind of going to decenter myself from this. I'm not going to prioritize.
And shout out to American Man in the chat. He says, bro, I tried to listen to some of this. I couldn't do it. Salute to you, Hood, for doing the work. Bro, I am here to help us all through it. That is how I rationalize my position on this journey, right? I'm here to help us through it. That's all I'm trying to do. Because I don't know my way either, but we got to get through it together. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to understand the retardation of the modern leftist woman. Because most women are they're almost biologically left-leaning anyway. And God bless them. You can't hate them for it. You just got to learn to love them through it. But a lot of women are kind of, leaning toward a lot of these ideas naturally. And then politics comes along and social media and the media in general comes along and tells them all these fabulous, fantastical things. And, now they're all kind of tired and it's awful. It's really sad, but we have to get through it together no matter what.
Prioritize the hunt for a romantic partner in my life. Doing so has been pretty fruitless and I have very little control over it. And it's overwhelming and it makes me feel bad. Women are often pressed to introspect and change things about themselves in order to find a mate. And therefore saying, you know what, this just isn't going to be my priority right now is a way to find enjoyment in life because you no longer are trying to filter everything through the lens of, am I worthwhile because I have found a mate? What do you make of those critiques?
Yeah, well, I completely welcome people, choosing whatever romantic path does actually serve them. And I think for a lot of people, a path of independence, a path of genuinely decentering men or women is indeed going to be a fulfilling path of happiness for them. However, I think that's something completely different than
Now, right away, I think it almost goes without saying that in general, from a grand historical perspective, there have always been men and women too who just don't, they don't do well romantically, right? Although more women are probably going to reproduce, generally speaking, than men in any given context, still not everybody is going to be a winner. That's just the nature of life, right? But the problem that we're having in this moment is that there are way too many losers and not enough winners. And that's a sociological phenomenon that these two women are these two leftist women, mind you. That's what's really fascinating about this, because it is leftist culture that has pushed us into this direction, socially speaking, anyway. It is all this kind of social permissiveness, feminism and no-fault divorce and girl power and Me Too and DEI, all these things, all these different things. Death by 1,000 cuts has now kind of, gotten us to this point. And even the leftist women are now complaining about their, oncoming utopia.
Being a heteropessimist and being somebody who engages in heteropessimism online, I think that, if you're going to decenter something, wrapping yourself and your identity in the antagonistic, attitude against it is not actually decentering it. You are just centering yourself in the antagonism instead.
Wow, Jesse Lee says 25% of Black women are gay per the CDC. That's a lot of decentering, all right? They are decentering the hell out of Black men right now. Shout out to Black women, y'all. They are decentering men every day.
Get what they come to church doing? Being gay!
That's really, my main critique of that that critique of mine is that people who are claiming, decentering men, but are still aligning with heteropessimism they're not actually doing the decentering that they're talking about. But I do completely agree that that's decentering men is indeed what will make some women happier, and people should completely do that. As for people's lived experiences that would bring them to the point of heteropessimism, again, completely not interested in discounting people's actual experiences with heterosexuality. I think it's so obvious that many of us have experienced something negative in dating, whether it's something as simple as a bad date or something like sexual violence, and those problems are obviously real and something to deal with. However, I do still think
I think it has to be noted that American Western women in particular, maybe you could make this argument in parts of Europe that it's just generally unsafe on the street. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are always neighborhoods and streets you shouldn't be walking down and parts of the city that are dangerous for anybody, right? But the idea, like I remember a couple of years back that they're in college women, I think, started this concept. The idea that we live in a great culture. That was the terminology going around, pardon my YouTube parlance, right? But that was the terminology that they were using, roughly speaking, right? It was a great culture in America. When the fact is, America, as far as women are concerned, is the most protected place a woman could ever be born into, black, white, or whatever. And frankly, in America, a woman's safety isn't necessarily the fault of the laws per se, right? We do punish men in particular who commit crimes of that nature against women. We have no problem throwing men in jail forever for whatever they do to women. But the idea that women are somehow unprotected in this country, it really is more of a localized and familial issue. It's either some in-house thing or you just really live in a horrible neighborhood and bad things happen to everybody there. You know what I mean? But the idea that women in general are just unsafe, broadly speaking, in America, like women have all the motion they could ever ask for in America. Matter of fact, women have so much freedom in America that they're choking on it right now.
I think that there is this cultural undercurrent that I think especially women on the internet are being kind of algorithmically driven to, that isn't about our own experiences, isn't about liberating us as women, isn't about making us safer. It's really just about expressing an unproductive discontentment online.
Okay, interestingly put, an unproductive discontentment. Why is it?
Right. Women complaining online apparently has real world consequences. Who knew that women running their mouths uncontrollably could have negative real world effects, right? Who knew? I feel like this is a lesson old as the Bible. Did you know that back during medieval times, they had a thing called the bride scold? They used to put a bridle, a whole head garment on a woman and some kind of horse's bridle in a woman's mouth so she couldn't talk properly. And they called it a wives' scold or a bride scold, something like that. But basically, they used to put contraptions on women so they would shut the hell up in public, right? Who ever thought that women running their mouths uncontrollably could lead to dire consequence, right? It's crazy that could happen like that, isn't it?
Unproductive.
Because for me, it's entirely digitally centered. And kind of like what I was saying with how there's a lot of talk of decentering men, but not actually doing that. I think that, there is something productive in the genuine, decentering of something that does not serve you. And, I would love to see women who and I'm speaking in generalities here, again, like you said, men can have this kind of hetero-pessimistic discontentment with women and want to decenter women as well. But for example, women who are experiencing, feelings of hetero-pessimism and engaging in a lot of this negativity online, there isn't really a lot of talk of, of building a fulfilling life outside of the parameters of heterosexuality. There's not a lot of talk of, women.
What if there isn't really much of a fulfilling life outside of the parameters of heterosexual relationships? I know, right? It's crazy work. What if the white Christian heteronormative patriarchy is the path to actual happiness?
You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall.
Right, like you lay that out as if there's another method another known method of widespread like social cohesion and national dynamism, right? Like when we were when we were most like what you just described, we were also at our most dynamic. Whatever social problems that were, in the country still, it made for a powerful nation. And it seems like getting away from the values that made the nation powerful makes the nation less powerful. What if there are only a handful of ways to actually do things the right way? Like maybe there are like one or two, three max. I'll give you three max if you're really a genius. But what if there are only one or two real ways to do a certain thing the right way? Have you ever thought about that?
A lot of this negativity online, there isn't really a lot of talk of, of building a fulfilling life outside of the parameters of heterosexuality. There's not a lot of talk of, women forming a community together, a real life,
Women do have community together. It's called the projects or the Section 8 apartment complex. That's totally a female community. It's like nothing but women doing it for themselves. And then also too, on the opposite end of like the economic spectrum, you have I think Brianna Greyjoy is going to start talking about this a little bit later. She lives in what she describes as the urban polycule, which is the very kind of, like I said, it's the opposite of the economic spectrum. It's not like Section 8 for ghetto bitches. It is, it's hipster, it's young, hip, urban living, for the middle and upper middle class aspirational type people, where, for all kinds of reasons, having proper long-term relationships that ultimately lead to children, they're hard to come by. But, we got each other. You guys remember that TV show Friends? With like Ross and like that retarded blonde chick and that one guy, Joey, who was kind of like dumb, but, girls always liked them because that's, kind of a TV archetype too. I mean, it's low-key a real-world archetype. You guys remember Friends? Friends was the actual like model for the urban polycule. Now they all kind of, because it was Hollywood and they got to sell you bitches dreams, they all kind of were trying to get married, and some of them did. But the reality of it is that Friends was trying to model something for a lot of us in a way that it was hard to understand when we weren't really like able to look back at it. But Friends was the urban polycule.
A real life for oneself. I personally don't find the internet-centered antagonism and animosity to be something that provides me fulfillment. I'm certain that there are some people that it provides a sense of fulfillment, but I don't think it yields true community or connection for people to complain online like this.
It's interesting because my experience has been that the discourse around if having a boyfriend embarrassing, is hetero pessimism or hetero fatalism the way of the world, it feels as though it provides an important permission structure to realize that there are structural factors at play and there are broad trends in how people are feeling in the dating market that help individual women and men. Sorry, I do speak to more women, but help individuals feel as though their experiences are more universal, and therefore, to the extent that they are blaming themselves and feeling isolated and self-critical for their failure to hit certain milestones, it is a relief. And that these articles provide a connection point and a language for us to understand that it's not just me and my own personal failing, it's all of us. In a similar way, not to take this too far, but I think that Bernie Sanders talking about universal health care in 2016 and platforming all of these individual Americans who were feeling this deep shame and not being able to provide health care for their loved ones, realized it's not just because I didn't work hard enough and I didn't do Reaganomics well enough. It's because there are structural factors that are making it increasingly expensive for me to provide for this basic life-sustaining need.
You mean like a woman who respects you and wants to work together toward raising children and building something toward, old age and retirement? Is it too expensive to kind of, make an attempt to get something like that? Is that what you're saying? Is there an economic structural hurdle being placed in front of everyone that's just making it a lot more difficult, making the prospects look a lot less enticing, right? And not to even, be that guy, because everybody acts like I hate women because I can read and make observations. But somehow, if you excel at things like pattern recognition, they might say you hate women. It's crazy how those two are connected. But the fact that we have almost an entire government and economic system that is at the minimum very, very cautious of doing anything that might be perceived as harming women, and at the most is directly attempting to help women in any way they can think of, might that be a part of the structural reality that's making modern relationships difficult? I'm just throwing that out there. I'll be having theories and hypotheses and whatnot. I bomb atomically, Socrates' philosophies and hypotheses and all of that Wu-Tang shit.
So I'm not going to sit here and say that every single aspect of the discourse is productive. A lot of it, to your point in the article, is dunking and jokes on that, TikTok or whatever. But it does seem to me to be serving some social purpose. What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, so one of the things I do talk about in the article is, the concept of the personal is political. And I think that what you're describing is
wait a minute. Who introduced us to the idea that the personal is political?
We are absolutely winning right now. Absolutely. We have done more than change the conversation. We changed the balance of power in the federal government.
I mean, between men and women, who is it that, popularized the notion that the personal is, in fact, the political? I really didn't take my time. I just kind of jumped on air with this because I was already running behind schedule anyway. But you guys remember that famous chart that shows the kind of political divergence between men and women over the years, especially in the Trump era, where men have moved nominally to the right. Men have mostly hugged the center, and a few guys have moved further to the extreme, but women have went drastically off the left end of the spectrum. They fell off a cliff, basically, going so far left. And so all I'm saying is maybe it was the women who changed the conversation and made everything that was personal political.
It is an example of how that phrase is indeed, helpful and liberating to people. It identifies that some of the personal issues that we face are indeed the result of, something bigger, a political issue, a political structure, and that it isn't a matter of our personal failings. And that if we are able to, find the language to address what we're experiencing, then we might indeed be better at finding a solution for it and finding community around it. However, what I see with heteropessimism, and why I think it's become a problem and something that we should, at least be conscious about, is that we have kind of inverted the phrase "the personal is political" to where now, with something like, "is having a boyfriend embarrassing?"
No, you have not inverted the phrase, young lady. That's not what's happening here. What's happened is we've taken your retarded notion to its extreme logical conclusion. All right. That is the thing. This is why there's the concept, a place for everything in its place. Too much of anything, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Like, we have these little kind of quips and phrases that we all know colloquially that caution us about moving too far in one direction or the other, right? And what's happened is your concept of the personal being political has now taken its place at the logical extreme of having a boyfriend. I think they're going to talk about this at some point. Having a boyfriend is like Republican coded, right? Somehow for a lot of these modern, young, leftist, urban, liberal women, the idea that they have a boyfriend at all, the idea that there's anything about them that would make a man attracted to them at all, is somehow right-wing and Republican Trump. It's MAGA. Heterosexual relationships are basically MAGA coded, all right? Getting bitches is some Donald Trump shit, all right? That's not me. That's me extrapolating and taking it to its logical extreme, right? That's what these women are basically talking about, right? The idea that men and women getting together and doing the lambada, doing the forbidden dance, it is actually right-wing, it's MAGA coded, and that's how crazy leftism has gotten.
If you think I'm here to play around with y'all, God damn it, I'm not.
All right. I think a lot of us are, totally conscious of that kind of being a joke, not that serious. But I do think that there is kind of a bubbling generation of young women for whom, having a boyfriend is legitimately socially embarrassing, and to align with men is socially embarrassing. But moreover, it's considered a political failure to be aligned with men in any way. And so instead of, something that they're experiencing in their personal life being, something that we can band together as, a broader political consequence, it's that your own personal life is the matter of political consequence, and that you are having a negative impact on, the political reality by doing something like being actively straight.
I mean, okay, so this article,
being actively straight. I hold on. We got to run that back a little bit. Let me absorb that in totality for a moment, y'all. Hold on. I've never heard of phrasing. I've never heard of anything like that. Being actively straight. What does that even mean?
It's that your own personal life is the matter of political consequence, and that you are having a negative impact on, the political reality by doing something like being actively straight.
Being actively straight is bad for the Democrat Party. Think about what that means. Like, they want you to be straight in the closet. They want you to be straight, but not too straight. You know what I mean? I was thinking about this whole thing because the other day we were talking about Streamer University and that whole thing with Black Boy and him being all like coming out the closet or whatever. Or maybe he's just, I learned a new word. Maybe he's gay baiting. Maybe he's just pretending to be gay to get that, you know, the gay money. Because gays be having money because they don't really make babies like that. And so maybe he was just doing that, right? I don't know. But this whole thing about being actively straight and it's bad for the Democrats. Think about this for a minute, right? They want you to be straight in the closet. They want straight people to be in the closet. And so, like, when I was thinking about the whole Streamer University thing, it occurred to me, and this is why, if ever the question is posed to you like directly and logically, this is how you can answer the question like objectively and logically, right? Because this is why I'm gonna answer the question without even asking it. This is why relationships, like just social relationships, like interactions, you know, workplace stuff like that, in school or whatever. This is why there is very little overlap between the world of straight men and gay men, right? Like most straight guys don't go around trying to bother the gays and pick on the gays. Like it's not a 1980s high school movie. No, I don't think that was ever really a big thing, right? But in general, there's just no overlap between these two worlds. And one of the reasons why is you'll never make the gays more masculine, but the gays will make everybody else gayer by you know, proximity. And that's just something that, you know, it's hard enough being a man. And now you got these niggas lowering the bar for every goddamn thing. That's what the OJ dude was really mad about with Plaque Boy. He was like, yo, Plaque, come on, man. I used to fuck with you back before you was doing all this extra shit. You know what I'm saying? You was just another brother trying to stream. Now you just you on the other team now. Like, I can't with you. I just can't. You know what I mean? And that's basically why there is just no overlap. And what these two women have kind of stumbled onto now is that things have gone so far down the progressive path that being, quote, actively straight, as this young lady just described it, is a bad thing. It might be perceived as a bad thing. Remember, having a boyfriend is MAGA Republican coded. That's like Trump shit.
You know, something that they're experiencing in their personal life being, you know, something that we can band together as, you know, of broader political consequence. It's that your own personal life is the matter of political consequence, and that you are having a negative impact on, you know, the political reality by doing something like being actively straight.
I mean, okay, so this article, having a boyfriend embarrassing now, by Shantae Joseph, keeps coming up in the discourse. The title of it seems to be talked about more than the substance of the article.
Yeah.
So we just go to what the thing is actually about for a second. As I recall, and I have it up in front of me now, it opens with a rejection of a kind of social media performative coupledom, where for a time, up until recently on social media, there was almost like a pick-me girl sort of desire to post your boyfriend as part of content to show something that your life was good and full and cute.
Now, remember this, as far as the idea of pick-me's go, it was not men that ruined the concept of the pick-me. It was always women who had a problem with other women who made it a point to be appealing to the masculine. Nobody hates a pick-me like women who don't get picked, or women who pretend they don't want to be picked. That's who ruined the idea of a pick-me, for the record.
And there were these videos of, you know, a woman in front holding the hand of the cameraman in different vacation spots around the world. There's language around soft launching your boyfriend on the apps. It was cultural capital to display your boyfriend. And this article is asking, well, is that going out of style because we no longer want to be pick-me's and center our lives and our personalities, at least on social media, through the lens of having a partner? Which suggests to me that that's not man-hating per se. It's asking the question of why any individual would choose to advertise their sort of sexual desirability or relationship desirability as the key aspect of who they are in their public presentation. And it's kind of an anti-pick me mantra. Did you take something else away from that piece?
Well, I think one of the things that always sticks with me with that piece is, there's some assessment of an influencer podcast where they're talking about, having boyfriends, and a lot of the comments are, to the effect of having a boyfriend is Republican coded. And so I do completely agree that I think the article in its original intention was to say that we are now in our, digital performance of the self shifting away from centering men. And
that is a very loaded statement, the digital performance of the self, which is almost to state that your digital self is not anything really, really connected. It is not yourself. It is like a performance of yourself, which is like a caricature almost, Like there's you being yourself, and then there's pretending to be yourself, if you understand what I mean. Like the way she kind of throws that phrase out there, it really implies something dark about like the social media mind of a lot of women and the modern women.
In my own personal life, I completely agree that like being somebody whose only identity is having a boyfriend, and especially making that your digital identity, that it is embarrassing. I wouldn't want that for myself. But I think that like we are kind of collectively losing the specificity of that, the intention of that article.
Jabroni, I like that comment. Shout out to Jabroni. He says they love coming up with new terms to describe why their lives suck. All these new words you be hitting me with. Oh my God. I think that's really the simplest answer though.
And there is a broader sense of embarrassment among young women right now about any kind of alignment with men, and a lot of fear of being called a pick me. I think that, you have to identify yourself as a girl's girl and identify yourself as the opposite of a pick me. And, I also feel like I'm way too old for either of those terms, but nevertheless, they get hurled at me in one way or another anyway. But yeah, I think, while we definitely threw the baby out with the bathwater, and a lot of the discourse around that particular is having a boyfriend embarrassing article, I think that it nevertheless reflects a broader anxiety that young women are experiencing right now.
Ooh, shout out to anxiety. I wonder if there's a pill you could take for that.
In how their alignment with men, to whatever extent that may be, is being perceived by other people.
It's interesting because that line.
Whoa. Wait. This is why I wanted to cover this show, and I had to do it fresh today. I didn't want to wait till tomorrow or some other day because I really got to get up in the morning. But we're going to do this goddamn show because she really does. Through this whole conversation, they really do drop a lot of weighty ideas. Like, think about what she just laid out.
How their alignment with men, to whatever extent that may be, is being perceived by other people.
Women are experiencing anxiety about how their alignment to men is being perceived by other people. And regular, human terms, if I can translate that into like man speak for a minute, if I can mansplain that shit for you, women have now realized that the shit that they say, that them running their mouths makes people like them a little bit less, a lot of bit less even. You running your mouth makes you less likable. It's like they're slowly hitting that they're bending that curve a little bit now.
For an embarrassing article, I think that it nevertheless reflects a broader anxiety that young women are experiencing right now in how their alignment with men, to whatever extent that may be, is being perceived by other people.
It's interesting because that line in the boyfriend is embarrassing piece about is having a boyfriend Republican coded. That's definitely in there. I don't know the context of where that came from. That feels like a kind of a TikTok joke more than a deeply felt belief, but maybe I'm giving too much credit to whoever actually wrote that. But there is some truth to it. And you talk about it in the very beginning of your piece. You open saying gender relations are tense to the point of hostility these days. Straight men and women are politically and culturally divided. In a world of Andrew Tate and OnlyFans, trad wives, and incels, just over half of single men and women alike report feeling pessimistic about finding a partner. This idea that we are, in fact, increasingly culturally and politically divided along gender lines is something that came up when I pulled my polycule about this article earlier today in advance of recording this. Folks who listen to Bad Faith regularly know that on the Valentine's Day episode this year, there was a joke made about how I felt in decentering men and really embracing friendships. I'd fallen into a group of really wonderful people that live in my building.
Shout out to Brianna Greyjoy's polycule, by the way. You know, she seems like she's landed relatively softly. You know, I'm happy for her. I don't know that there's a great polycule for every woman out there, especially like, you know, young Black women, you know, young urban Black women. I don't think the majority of them are going to have a great polycule like Brianna has found for herself. And it's unfortunate, but there's nothing I can do about it. But, you know, shout out to Brianna's polycule, though. At least they get to get some love in this.
And it was jokingly referred to as my polycule because I felt like I got a lot of the benefits of having men around and mixed gender company without actually being in a relationship. So I pulled my polycule. And one of the anecdotes that one of the women offered is that she's pessimistic in part because she has had the experience of having men hide from her their genuine political orientation and basically wasting her time and then revealing in the 11th hour that they were much more conservative than they had purported to be.
Niggas lied about the box. Niggas lied about Trump to get the box, y'all. Is that what these niggas is doing? Is that what leftists meant? Is that what you have to do now to get the box? You got to lie about Trump? I would never. You know, I respect women. I don't want to take your rights away, baby. I love you voting. You niggas lying and get the box, y'all. Tell me that's not real. Tell me that's not real. Tell me that you niggas don't be lying about Trump to get the box. I hate you niggas. Oh my God. Why is this true? Why is this true? Come on. Of all the things that you could be doing, you gonna lie about Trump to get the box, man. You niggas is terrible. I can't believe y'all, man. What the hell is going on out here?
I'm done. I'm done with life. And it's all Jermaine's fault. It's always Jermaine's fault.
You niggas is awful.
Part because she has had the experience of having men hide from her their genuine political orientation and basically wasting her time and then revealing in the 11th hour that they were much more conservative than they had purported to be. Is that?
Hold on, wait. Is that what it is? We got all kind of new linguistic terminologies and whatnot. My man Dominicoon says it's called woke fishing. Is that what we're doing, y'all? Is that what we're doing? We're calling it woke fishing. It's like catfishing, but with MAGA dick. I pause, right? Pause, but I gotta throw it out there because that's really the name of the game. It's like you ain't know you was gonna get this MAGA dick, right? You thought you was gonna get some little limp blue dick. Like, no, this bitch is big and red. Like, goddamn, surprise. Like, you niggas is awful. I hate you niggas for making me tell these jokes, by the way. I hate each and every one of you for making me have to tell these jokes.
The anecdotes that one of the women offered is that she's pessimistic in part because she has had the experience of having men hide from her their genuine political orientation and basically wasting her time and then revealing in the 11th hour that they were much more conservative than they had purported to be. Is that not a real phenomenon that might lead someone to be pessimistic and legitimately pessimistic in the dating market?
Yes, I completely, that is something I have other girlfriends that have experienced this themselves. And yeah, it's completely real. And it's one of the things that has kind of led us to this, stalemate in the gender war right now is that, that political divide is real. And it's,
You know what? This is let me just take a minute to if there is like a few women listening, because I know there are always one or two, a couple are fans, one is a hater, you know. If there are any women listening, let me explain something if I might, not that I know anything about anything, but I know something about some things. And as a dude, I think that this is something women may not get. And this is why, like, ultimately, like, you being yourself as a dude and all of your shitty greatness is supreme. Don't try to like pretend to be somebody else. Don't try to pretend to be nicer than who you are and all that shit. Because basically, like, if I gotta lie to you to get you, I can never really love you. You know what I mean? And isn't that what you want from me ultimately at the end of it? Like, you want a nigga to love you because that's when you feel like you won and you can get away with shit, right? But if I gotta lie to you about a bunch of bullshit, if I gotta pretend to be MAGA, I can't actually be with you. I gotta pretend to not be racist. Like, come on. I gotta pretend to not want to deport immigrants and shit. I gotta pretend that I don't ever like you voting because I know that low key you want to vote against me. Like, I don't want to have to pretend. I want you to love me in spite of the fact that I want to take all of your rights away. It could never really work any other way. You have to love me in spite of the fact that I want you to not vote. Shit like that. If you're really gonna make me lie to you about basic shit like that, this could never ever work. Now, what happens between us because of that is totally a skill issue, and good luck to you. Good luck and Godspeed. But I just hope that that's something that you girls out there understand. Like I said, I don't know everything, but I know some things about some things.
It's impossible to ask people to budge on either line when it's something that they, is such a core part of their identity and their sense of ethics and morals. And so it's obviously that it's a completely, I think the pessimism there is a totally natural response that people are having. I think that nevertheless, we do have to find some kind of way forward, and that this collective narrative of heteropessimism perhaps isn't that.
Is the way forward simply women shutting up about how unhappy they are?
Yes. What the hell? Why is that so hard for women to really accept on any level that and this is just an across the board general theme about modern women, from America to South Korea, hell, even in Latin America. You know what I mean? Like, it's a myth that Latin American women are somehow more like submissive. Like, they're more domestically skilled, maybe, but I don't know if submissive is the same thing. Because women across the world don't want to shut up. They don't like the idea that shutting up is somehow something that they should do to help everybody or help everything else, right? That is the last thing that you could ever try to convince a woman to do, is to shut up for the greater good. You ever try to tell a woman to shut up for the greater good? You really think that's how that's going to work? No woman has ever shut up for the greater good. If you could have saved the Titanic by having all the women on board have a moment of silence, more people would have died that day. There's just no way you can ever sell that shit. But that's kind of like the painful truth of it, right? It's ironic as hell, but that's the reality. They don't like being told that. But it's as practical as it might be. There's that saying about, like, why do they say women and children first? So men can think of a solution in peace and quiet, right? Like, no matter how practical of a solution it actually could be, they will hate you for telling them that.
Narrative of heteropessimism perhaps isn't that.
Is the way forward simply women shutting up about how unhappy they are?
No, of course not. Of course not.
So what, because I do feel like that's sort of the tension here. You go on to write, okay, you say,
Women say of men that they are at best clueless and emotionally immature and at worst actively toxic. Okay. Among men, women are often viewed as romantically spoiled, drowning in options. We're too self-absorbed to select from, even if we're worth their time at all. Okay. And you, throughout the article, sort of juxtapose this manosphere phenomenon, which we talked about the last time you were on the podcast, as something that is affecting how men, especially younger men, are coming to relationships and how they're valuing women. And that seems like a very extreme change in male attitude that women are contending with. It's not all men, obviously, but it is significant enough that anecdotally, women are saying there's a gender politics polarization that's happening that is leading many women to feel like they're not able to find sort of their ethical match in the opposite sex. The women's complaint here, as you describe it, the men's complaint about women, as you describe it, is that women are romantically spoiled and drowning in options. Now, is that true? Is that what's happening? That women, all the women who are sitting around wanting to be married and partnered are single because they have so many options?
Well, I don't think that either side of this, this gender war tension is completely 100% accurate in their assessment of the opposite gender. And while there are men who are politically, of a stance that just is not going to align with a lot of today's young women, there are also a lot of young women who are, what's the term I'm looking for? If you want to look, for example, at how they're able to use a dating app, for example, compared to a man, like that is just the
real quick. I think one of the big sort of divergence points politically for men and women is that as much as women resent men for this idea that men want to hold women back and want to take their rights away and want to stop them from having dreams and options and all this stuff, like as much as they resent men for that, whether it's rightful or wrongfully, but still I think men also resent the fact that women right now, not theoretically, not some proposition way down the line, but right now, actively in this moment, women are basically voting for and campaigning for things that actively harm men. And they kind of like call it out by name. They blame the patriarchy, which is just men and this sort of nebulous kind of concept. They don't really always blame an individual man, but like they blame men in general for the very idea that women are not currently equal to men. No matter how much the culture and the society is bent to help women rise, women seem to just have this kind of never-ending grievance against men.
Material reality of being a woman on a dating app is that it is easier.
How's that? Say more.
I mean, I wish I had the data right in front of me to lay this out more succinctly. But for example, I don't think any woman who's been on a dating app, she's aware that getting a match and starting a conversation with a man who might be interested in taking her out, whether he is of any kind of like caliber of man that this woman wants to date, is, beside the point. It's much easier for a woman to get a match and get a date on.
The 80-20 rule is everywhere. You can quibble with it. You can argue with it. You can try to rationalize away all the realities and the suppositions that follow from it. But the simple fact is, the general concept of the 80-20 rule, especially in a world where a lot of our interactions are preceded by online dating and online matchmaking, the 80-20 rule is paramount. It's damn near a biblical law, right?
On dating apps, the level at which a woman is swiped right on versus a man, there's a very stark difference there statistically. And so that would lead men to believe that women are swimming in options. Whether that actually reflects the reality of how anyone would want to date, I don't think that's the case. You know, I don't think it's a fair assessment to say that women are swimming in romantic options. But if we want to look at the digital realm of dating and how people are able to use dating apps, or, you know, the way we use social media, for example, it does present this narrative of women being in, you know, a position of extreme choice that, again, is not necessarily reflective of the reality of how we date.
Yeah, it's tough. When I pull the polycule, one woman sent a screen grab of her Hinge profile, which showed this alert that she says she gets semi-regularly, which says, "You've seen everyone for now. Try changing your filter so that more people match your criteria, or check back later." And she says, I swipe through every single person on Hinge and Bumble every single day within a 50-mile radius, and eventually get this wall message that says, "We're basically out of guys."
Mm-hmm.
Right. And at the same time, I know that there's a discourse that women are setting their filter for 6'2" and above and all of these other criteria. But I talked about this with the group as well. And they're feeling why in particular they're feeling so pessimistic is because the attitude among the women in the group is that they are consistently trying to broaden what they think that they want.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a problem, and it's sort of a trap of modernity. The more economically successful women become, the more social status, the higher above men that women ultimately get. What winds up happening is a kind of like I said, a trap of modernity, where there just becomes significantly less men in any given woman's pool of options that they become attracted to, right? And now let's think of it mathematically, right? Let's say that they're just a smaller pool of men that they're actually attracted to, right? Now, out of those men, a certain amount of those men are just gonna not be attracted to them off rip. So you take them out of the equation immediately. So now the pool shrinks a little more. And then out of the men who are attracted to them, let's just say for reasons on both parties' fault, you know, either he's going to have horrible qualities or a horrible life situation that makes it hard, or he's going to look at her and say, "I can't get with this shit," and that makes it harder. But either way you have it, the pool of viable men goes down a little bit more. And then now you got to go through the process of kind of like finding these men and going from one to the other. It becomes a lot over time.
I'm trying to avoid using the phrase lower the bar, but that's really what I'm saying. Because they don't want to exclude someone who could be a great match just because they lack some superficial quality or some quality that they thought was a deal breaker. And despite being increasingly flexible about what it might look like to have partnership or what their partner might look like, they still feel like it's difficult to connect with someone. And then when they do, there is a disinterest in converting those dates into a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so again, all of that is real. And I don't think that there's anywhere in my entire argument about heteropessimism, there's nowhere that I'm trying to say that like the struggles that people are experiencing right now are trying to date. All of that is real. I acknowledge that throughout my work. You know, the frustrations and the anxieties and the fears that people have, those are all real and warranted and backed by their own lived experience. However, if you're somebody who's experiencing these things and you still do want, you do still ultimately want a connection with somebody, you don't want to completely, separate yourself from, the world of romantic possibility or whatever else. How then does the attitude of heteropessimism serve that aim? And I think that like a lot of the issues that we are
It's like they've complained themselves into a corner. They've complained so hard about so many things that matter so little to everybody. And kind of look at Brianna Greyjoy's face right now. You know, maybe this is total accidental, but this is textbook RBF right here. Put a 1 in the chat if you know what RBF means. I find it ironic as her guest is describing this kind of moment of ultimate. It's like she's climaxed frustration. You know, she's hit peak frustration here, and Brianna Greyjoy is just sitting there with perfect RBF. It's a great freeze frame. I would have almost used this as the thumbnail, but I couldn't get a great shot of the girl at the same time.
We're experiencing right now are ultimately, they are bigger structural political issues, that kind of deal with how we have been, disconnected, like from our social fabric, really, and how we, have how much our phones have become mediators into our personal lives. And instead, we, through the narrative of hetero pessimism, we are focusing our qualms and our issues with the broader culture onto the opposite gender in a way that, as I already, the word I used before, is unproductive. If our desire is to connect with people, then dwelling on this narrative of the problem being heterosexuality, the problem being women, the problem being men, isn't going to get us to the place of happiness that we're looking for.
What if the problem is women or men? Like,
at least you're willing to, embrace the question. Shout out to Brianna for at least saying it. What if the problem is women? I'm not saying the problem is women. I think it's a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more complicated, a little bit more layered, more structural. It's definitely women, but I think there's a lot of other shit happening too.
What if the problem, it's not a vibes based, it really is structural. So we've talked in the past on this podcast about, the traditional drivers toward marriage. If women are reliant on men for money, basically, then that becomes a priority. That's fully what's driving people into coupledom in the first place. And these other factors of attraction or
yes, Brianna, basic financial realities were a huge driver for male and female domestic partnership up until the modern world in the last 30, 40 years. I know it kind of removes a lot of the mysticism and the romance and whatnot from it all, but that is the basic reality. A lot of that, the world, the romantic world that our grandparents, let's say that, let's say our grandparents had that world. A lot of that was really dependent upon the fact that the majority of the money was made by men, and there was no other real expectation. Nowadays, we have women who expect to make basically a man's corporate salary and then still have 1950s levels of male options to choose from. And it's just not a viable desire. It's just the game is no longer constructed in that way.
Or connection or politics, they never even came into play. And if we're living in a world that is increasingly economically precarious, where financial parity has meant that the contribution that a man is going to make as compared to a woman to a household is even or even potentially less. We have changing norms in terms of what women are expected to bring to the table in terms of housekeeping and childcare and childbirth, but biology still overdetermines women's participation in those fields. Both sides are feeling like they're not especially appreciated for what they're bringing to the table. There's a big question mark for many people, especially younger folks, as to whether or not they want to have kids in the first place, which really really begs the question, why are we getting married in the first place? And there is a
yes, ladies. I think that is a very, very viable critique that men have about the modern dynamic. The more women pull away from the traditional feminine concepts, the less men are attracted to whatever else women have to offer. Like the idea that, traditional and not to be like a stickler or whatever, but because everybody lives in 2026, right? We all are children of modernity. But the idea that men want something that is kind of approximating traditionalism, I don't think you can just like socialize the majority of men away from that concept. Like, especially when there's still men who can look around and see the options available and choose those more desirable options. Like, you really would have to like not only isolate the men from any other options, but then abuse them to the point that they don't even like look for these options anymore. And you haven't been able to do that. And so men, it's just, I think you've gotten men to the point of like peak liberalism where we're just not going to get any more liberal, any more permissive. All right. Men are just not going to get any gayer than men already are. All right. We're just at a peak.
I think on top of all of this, it's like, feels to me like a failure to be able to articulate what people actually want out of marriage when some of the sort of existential and material drivers of marriage are no longer at play. And that's not to say there aren't good reasons to be partnered and have companionship, and there's male loneliness and there's all this stuff. But sometimes I do feel like there's all this conversation happening up here when fundamentally I do sometimes feel like there's a failure to articulate what it would take to make a partnership worthwhile when some of the historical motives no longer exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, completely. And I do think a lot of what you're saying, the economic motives of marriage, the political, religious motives of marriage, those aren't there anymore. And I think that's one of the explicit reasons I think that we, especially as women, could be a little bit more optimistic about, our romantic futures, in that we are no longer relying on marriage and men, for our economic security, for, our, political, religious identity. We can pursue heterosexuality strictly because it's what we want to do. But I think you're completely right that,
No, nobody wants it. We were just born that way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Duh. Now, I don't know if you can say the same thing about the other, thing, because I think that's what she was trying to like cleverly make a quip about, was just born this way. But yeah, the overwhelming vast majority of human beings do have just natural proclivities. I know it's a shocker, right? It's controversial, isn't it?
I think that you're completely right, though, that we're in this really messy moment where we all, a lot of us are still holding on to, the idea of marriage or a family, and, the cultural narrative of that being what we're supposed to want or supposed to have. But then also,
it's funny as hell too. Non Sequitur says women sabotaging women. You know what's ironic about that? I was just over on fucking Drip Nation. I was on Drip's panel. Got into this whole stupid ass argument because there's always some weird dick rider that has like a personal problem with me, want to argue with me instead of arguing like the conversation or whatever. And that was actually the whole question at hand. Can women teach other women how to get married and how to like, be appealing to men or whatever? And it's ironic as hell because here you have two young, modern, relatively attractive women, liberal women, and they're all clueless and mystified, bro. They don't know what the hell's going on. All the education that they got between them, they probably got like 11 years of university between the two of these women, and neither one of them know what the hell is happening right now. It's fucking amazing.
So the current cultural reality that those things aren't playing out the way that we were told they would. They aren't serving us the way that we were told that they would. And so there's, that's a big reason why we're experiencing this tension right now, is that all of these institutions are in a state of flux. And I think a lot of the hetero pessimism people are expressing right now is actually a broader discontentment with how these institutions, how they serve us.
Yeah. So I do think that the follow-up question, and why I keep coming back to this, but is it real? I do think that some of your push to have us be hetero optimistic, it can feel a little bit like you're asking us to be sort of delusional, or to just ignore the reality on the ground. And to what end? Is an individual being more sanguine about the possibility of meeting someone really going to make that more likely if the reason that they're not meeting a woman isn't meeting a man is because he's MAGA, or a man not meeting a woman because a woman maybe doesn't want to have multiple kids anymore in a world where there's no childcare, and all of the attendant health risks that are involved. And there's so much economic instability, and who knows what the kind of world this child is going to grow up into, right? What am I being optimistic for? Is that kind of like a hope and change message when we need a more pragmatic, okay, we're going to do democratic socialism now message. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that is like obviously at the core of my argument and my writing here, is that I am an optimistic person, and I am somebody who believes in the power of optimism, however woo we might want to, frame that to be. Like, I do think that there is inherent value in being optimistic and in wanting human connection and wanting better for people, wanting people to be happy. But I think that in and of itself is something to prioritize and care about. But, thinking about on the ground of hetero pessimism, which again, we are really only, when we talk about hetero pessimism, we really do only look at it as something that women are experiencing. But, by my perspective, the manosphere is.
Here we go. They always got to drag the manosphere into it. All right. Keep the manosphere's name out your goddamn mouth.
I'm done with life, and it's all Jermaine's fault. It's always Jermaine's fault.
Its own brand of heteropessimism. It encourages a very negative view of women. And, so I think about it, if there was a young man who was, drawn into the manosphere, who started harboring, the completely misogynistic attitudes towards women, started talking, a lot online about how much they don't like women, what disappointments they are, their frustrations with women in this very generalized sense, it would be quite obvious why they will not successfully find a partner. At least.
And it's crazy. That is like such an unfair diagnosis of an issue. Like, not once do they consider the fact that women being, modern, liberal, feminist, educated women is also the reason why these women will not find, love and happiness. But somehow you talking about modern, liberal, educated, feminist women on a podcast is all the reason why you're lonely and single as a dude, right? It's such a bullshit kind of description, but this is what happens when you leave them alone to talk about things by themselves. They come up with crazy ideas.
At least not a partner who loves and respects themselves. I know that there are plenty of women who do associate themselves with the women of the manosphere, as the documentary that we discussed last time shows. But, it's the classic argument of you can catch more flies with what is it, with honey rather than vinegar or something with like that. Mm-hmm. And so it's I am critical of the ways that we as young women have kind of absorbed this culturally popular narrative of it, very loudly, vocally
hating men. Have you noticed how, although there is, the manosphere and the Tate and the Kevin, Mike check, are we still here? Mike check, put a 1 in the chat if we're back. What just happened? All right, was it just a glitch or did they zap me? I want to be sure because I'm trying not to, I'm trying not to get zapped here. But if it was a glitch, I think maybe we're cool, technology issues. Hold on, I don't even remember what she just said. I was about to say something. Let's jump back at it.
You can catch more flies with what is it, with honey rather than vinegar or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's I am critical of the ways that we as young women have kind of absorbed this culturally popular narrative of it, very loudly, vocally sizing men as a monolith, and that it
yeah man hating leads to lonely women. I know it's a crazy, like it's one of those Isaac Newton type of things. It's a revolutionary, it's groundbreaking, it's like Einstein's theorem or something, but that's the reality. Women hating men leads to women being lonely in the mass.
It's starting to feel a little bit like, womanosphere light. And I'm obviously well aware that misogyny and misandry are of two totally different consequences. They're not even really, comparable. But on a basic level, regardless of whatever like the consequences of misandry might be and how it might affect men or whatever, I don't think being being a misandrous woman, I don't think is actually making us any happier is kind of my.
No, feminism is not making them happier. It's like watching your baby take its first steps. They grow slow sometimes, but eventually they grow and they learn.
Very loudly, vocally sizing men as a monolith, and that it's starting to feel a little bit like, womanosphere light. And I'm obviously well aware that misogyny and misandry are of two totally different consequences. They're not even really, comparable. But on a basic level, regardless of whatever like the consequences of misandry might be and how it might affect men or whatever, I don't think being being a misandrous woman, I don't think is actually making us any happier. Is
a lot of you, listen, I know the jokes, a lot of men are gonna die alone. Yeah, a lot of men have always died alone. That's one of the, that's the deal with being a man. You can be fabulously wealthy or you can die alone in the gutter smoking crack, right? It's totally up to you. Totally up to you. But at the same time, a lot of you women are going to be old and alone with your cats and your AI powered dildos.
Is kind of my big issue here.
Yeah, I'm trying to square whatever argument it is that I'm making against my general attitude that manifestation is good and positive thinking is good. Before I come back to that point, though, I do want to say you did get kind of beat up a little bit online about this particular topic of comparing the manosphere to female-oriented, female-driven heteropessimism. You wrote in the article, heteropessimism isn't just for women. Men like white nationalist Nick Fuentes and the Tate brothers, influencers who are accused of human trafficking and rape, also promote a form of heteropessimism. Their basic argument is that women are not worth the time or something to dominate and discard, that there is something wrong with them, and that men are better off alone. These manosphere figures are far less thoughtful and more hateful in their wording than feminists.
Now, I mean, honestly, a lot of men in the modern world are better off alone than, being with your random modern woman. And I hate that that's true. I love love. Whether or not I'm good at it is irrelevant. I love love. But I just think that's a general, real concept. And it's unfortunate. The same way a lot of modern women have looked around at the landscape. They looked at all that they have, all that they've achieved. And they say to themselves, you know what? I'd rather be alone. I can do it without, a husband. And nobody hates on them, but when men say I can do it alone, it's like you're breaking the matrix or some shit. They send agents at you doing kung fu. It's crazy.
Feminist hetero pessimists, but their argument is functionally equivalent. Both groups argue that the other half is just bad. Give up, they tell us. Both are willing to let the cycle of loneliness and atomization continue. Again, to the polycule, there was some frustration here among that group as well, because one, it's not just that there was a feeling that, and you just acknowledge the difference. You acknowledge the difference in scale and magnitude in this piece as well. But one, I think women are not saying you're better off alone. The women are lamenting publicly.
A lot of the women are literally saying that, celebrating it. They celebrate their divorce and they shout their abortions. What do you mean?
But one, I think women are not saying you're better off alone. The women are lamenting publicly that they would very much like to be partnered. And the Andrew Tate side of this equation is saying, pump them and dump them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that the female backlash to this is, okay, but I love men and I want men and I'm desperate to be around men. I'm openly articulating my desire for men. I think men have worth and I want them in my life and I want them in my house and I want them to, be the father of my children. And I can't find one who's willing to do so. And
again, I refer you back to the 80-20 rule. It's not that women in general love men, right? Like you're hardcore. I was the OG lesbian ever since Stonewall. Like those women all love attractive, wealthy, masculine men who are, charming and courteous and respectful. That is one of the female archetypes for the perfect man or whatever, right? A lot of women do love the beautiful, theoretically perfect niggas, right? That's what they have in their mind, like this image, this idea of, what was that guy, the Adrian Gray, whatever. What was the name of that guy from 50 Shades of Dorian Gray? Dorian Gray. All you bitches love Dorian Gray, but that doesn't mean that you actually like men. And I think Brianna has kind of like she's got lost in the haze on that one. She doesn't quite understand or want to acknowledge that women are engaging in a little bit of subterfuge when they play this game of, we really like men. No, you like some guys. Most women like some guys, right? Because, that's also just the general nature of women. Women I don't think have ever been broadly like receptive of all men ever, right? That's just not how they're wired, and that's fine. But to say that women we love men, no. Even the worst of you only like the best of the men, but you don't really like men. And that's a big difference. And I think it's lost on you and by extension, lost on your audience at this point.
I want men and I'm desperate to be around men. I'm openly articulating my desire for men. I think men have worth and I want them in my life and I want them in my house and I want them to, be the father of my children.
Yeah, they all want Christian Grey, all right? They don't want, John Mayfield who drives the bus, you know, he's got a 401k and a pension. They don't necessarily want that guy. John Mayfield, who drives the bus with his 401k and his pension, he's got to do something else to look like a viable target, you know? He's got to have some edge.
Children, and I can't find one who's willing to do so. And so there's a bristling at that comparison, not just because of the magnitude of like, okay, Andrew Tate and them are doing sex trafficking and women are kvetching online, but because ultimately they what did you say? They're not both willing to let the cycle of loneliness and atomization continue. They're not both arguing that the other half is just bad. One half is arguing that women are like substandard, not really human on equal pairing. And the other is arguing that like, they don't like me back.
Sure. Yeah. And I also think that, you know, there's very much different levels of heteropessimism that people can be expressing. And I think that's kind of maybe where some of the disconnect of all of this comes from, is that a lot of people took it as like, oh, you know, if I'm one of these women who is shouting from the rooftops that like, I love men, I want to be with them, but I can't find somebody who, you know, who wants to do this with me. You know, I can understand why somebody like that might look at this article and be like, well, what is she talking to me for? Like this, you know, I'm not the Andrew Tate here. And they'd be completely right to think that. However, like there is a very large vocal set of people online who, you know, are kind of expressing more, you know, 4B type attitudes, you know, more of
4B is a woman thing, by the way. There are no manosphere guys who are talking about some 4B shit.
Unfollowing, you know, other women online when they get a boyfriend or, you know, things of that nature. And while, you know, again, to reassert the point that misogyny and misandry are not the same thing, I think that when we look at what the end product is, you know, for people on an individual level, by aligning with either of those ideologies, it's the end point is really more time spent angry online, and that's where the similarity between the two lies. I think that women who, you know, are you know, loud in their desire for men, and also in, you know, their criticisms of what they're actually experiencing in dating, those aren't exactly the women that I'm speaking to.
It's funny because there are men in the polycule, and you know, one of them was participating in this conversation we're having today about this interview, and he and other men have said that they also feel hetero pessimistic, that they feel as though the swiping culture, the women they meet on the apps, leads.
Now, right away, I got to say something. I should have started out talking about this, but I want to point something out. I really dislike the term hetero pessimism. It almost like it almost sounds like, you know, dating has gotten so bad for you that you almost regret being straight now. And I gotta say, I have never had a dry spell that ever felt anything like hetero pessimism. Right? It just never occurred to me to be pessimistic about heterosexuality. Like what the hell is wrong with you people? Like really, it is a real question. I'm not trying to be like provocative, but are you having such a hard time in the game of love that you now you resent even having to play the game?
These people are crazy. I'm telling you, they're crazy.
I think Red Illusion pointed it out, or he kind of alluded to it earlier in the show, and he said hetero pessimism would almost imply that there's also a homo optimism Do you all think you'd be better off, gay? Is that what you're going to be reduced to? Which, don't get me wrong. Like, she's in the urban polycule, which is very gay coded, by the way. And then also there's just that general kind of, lesbian female commune thing that they all kind of romanticize about. But like, really, what do you think you have other options? You're going to have to get this shit right. You understand? I'm sorry to break it to you, ladies, but being pessimistic is just not going to cut it. All right? You're either going to have to get this right or just jump the fence and be on the other team.
Nowhere. And they articulate a desire to be partners and have a relationship. And I have empathy for that. These are my friends. It is also true that when I start to ask some follow-up questions, because from the female perspective, it does seem like there's a whole chat full of women who are actively wanting to be in a relationship and be very expansive with the kind of man that they would be with. And a bunch of men who are, again, this is also heteronormative, but this is what we're talking about. The men are doing the choosing as to when the relationship is starting. It does feel a little odd to say, I'm here with the capacity to say to a woman, I want to be in a relationship with you. These are men who are dating women who have going on multiple dates with women and then deciding they don't want it to go farther. And then saying, but it's so hard. These are like it's not that it's not hard and that they're not encountering something real. Obviously, they're not meeting the kind of women that they want to be partnered with. But that seems to be the piece of the equation that isn't getting a lot of attention. What is happening at the point of, do I want to date this person? And I will also say that I'm hearing from both sides a feeling that I'm meeting people, we're going on dates, it's pro forma, but I'm not getting a sense of connection. There's no rapport. Women are complaining that men aren't asking questions. Men are complaining that women aren't asking questions.
I think there might be a general, like, broad truth, meaning like both genders are having some kind of social likability issues right now. Without even blaming one side or other, I think there is a lot to be said that both parties, men and women, have kind of lost their way. I was watching some clip earlier about the time before time back in like the 50s and whatnot, when they used to have all these kind of like PSAs on television, how to ask a girl on a date. You call her before 7 p.m. because those are respectable hours that wouldn't offend her parents. You ask her parents, preferably her father, for permission to speak to her. Like, they used to have PSA ads back in the day that nowadays it all sounds very quaint and cheesy and really old timey and whatnot. But I think the point of the clip I was watching, the commentary on the clip was that, without that kind of structure in place, people do sort of just go off the rails. And while there's always going to be that need for humans to kind of, push the boundaries and expand the limits of what's allowable, we do need some type of general median that we can all hold on to and have a universal understanding that this is kind of the acceptable norm. And now what we have is this kind of anything goes. We can do whatever the hell we want. What's that saying? You got to love me as I am. And it's like, nothing's working anymore. At least not this new liberal bullshit.
How is it that I am surrounded by interesting, dynamic people who function beautifully in a polycule, but who seem to go out in these romantic excursions where they find everyone seems to believe that they are the life of the party on these dates and that it's not being reciprocated? And I believe that they're correct in how dynamic they are. I experience them that way. But I've spoken at this point to too many people who are all having the same experience, but then seem not to be able to find each other and connect.
Yeah, I think you kind of really just got down to it, where I think that there's a lot about our current cultural condition. Again, maybe it's the damn phones. I am one of those people who like is very like, it's the phones that are causing a lot of our cultural problems.
But what do we mean by that? What do we mean by that?
Yeah, like I obviously don't mean your flip phone. But I mean, like, you know, the fact that a lot of us have multi-hour a day cell phone screen times, you know, 6 hours a day plus, that we are you know, spend so much of our time scrolling on social media that's like the main way through which we perform our identity and see other people perform their identity, that it has made everything feel so immediate that, you know, and I think there's good and bad to this too, but like, for example, you see something on the news and it feels much more, you know, emotionally close to home and pertinent to your everyday life than it probably would have if you were somebody who read the newspaper a couple of times a week or something. It's a constant feed of narratives that we're being exposed to.
Yeah. Social media is cooking everybody, but women are getting a lot cooked. Women are getting cooked harder than men, but still everybody's getting cooked though, just the same. Often
Negative narratives. All of that, I think, has made a lot of people into, you know, more selfish, disinterested, less fun to be around people. And
hold on, wait. This is groundbreaking, revolutionary shit right here.
Often negative narratives that we're being exposed to, often negative narratives. All of that, I think, has made a lot of people into, you know, more selfish, disinterested, less fun to be around people.
You say people, but I think that really means women. I think generally that's kind of, you know, how men are looking at women. You just, you know, more selfish, less fun to be around. Look at Brianna Greyjoy with her RBF. Like every freeze frame, if she's just not teeth showing, smiling at that moment, every freeze frame of her is just RBF.
Disinterested, less fun to be around people. And it's very easy for a lot of us to see that in other people. It's harder to see it in ourselves. And so I feel like that's kind of what you're describing, is a lot of these people who, you know, they think that they're the life of the party and they have so many criticisms of the people that they're dating. I think it's a bit of like a shared problem where, yeah, like people do seem worse in a lot of ways, but we are probably also a little bit worse ourselves. And maybe we need to kind of share in the responsibility of this a little bit.
But this is kind of the question. If, let's say we're all a little bit bad and annoying and worse, and everyone's a little bit right that the dates are just bad. I don't know that I buy that we're worse, but I do sort of buy that we don't have to, quote unquote, settle for any discomfort. I do sort of buy the idea that not that it's the phones per se, but that there is a low tolerance for discomfort that the modern era and modern conveniences, including online life, has brought. And that, again, if you don't need to literally split rent to survive, or literally get some genetic material to make a child and to help you financially support that child.
Now here is Brianna basically laying out the very kind of just structural reality and the criticism that I've been pointing out for a while. You know, it's beyond women just being hot girls and all of this. Like, all that stuff is bad too, but ultimately it really does boil down to just money and the general like structure of society. You know, the shape of modern society does not, it's not conducive to traditional romantic relationships.
Then it is much easier to write somebody off for idiosyncrasies that you might have accepted in the past. And by the way, some of those idiosyncrasies are significant, and people in the past should not have been together, but they didn't really have any choices. So there's you know, in your article, you talk about the value of hetero optimism. You kind of recount all the reasons why it's as good a time as any to be.
Yeah, you better be hetero optimistic. You better love being straight, all right? I don't know if you're going to like your other options better. Like, I promise you, you better love this shit.
Heterosexual, and you talk about, well, yes, Roe v. Wade was overturned, but you still had better access to reproductive care, and cite some other examples about how feminism has made wage parity better than it's ever been. And so it's a good as time as any.
Wage parity is literally the core of the problem. And there's no way to really get women to be like emotionally comfortable with that basic fact. But that really is the basic fact of it. Wage parity is really what's killing everything else stems from the idea or the efforts to have wage parity.
But that the flip side of that is, if you do have these sort of advantages and these freedoms, then do I need to get into my, like, what was constructively an arranged marriage or a required partnership? And I think that, to me, that is part of why despite it being called hetero.
I was just asking, I'm dripping them over there. Do you think arranged marriages can save the community? You know, even if it's just like, all the single moms in the Section 8 polycule, do you think Keisha's son and Latavia's daughter, if they kind of put them together and try to guide them through it all, you think they could kind of bring everything back? Arranged marriages for Section 8 kids.
Pessimism, there's this kind of like sigh of relief and optimism that's coming from the female side of this that sometimes gets expressed as like man-hating, man-bashing, which is like, fuck yeah, I'm free.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have to, these women are saying, well, I'm lowering and lowering the bar. And then one day they read an article about the state of the world. They're like, oh, it's not just me. Great. I don't have to do this anymore. And you said earlier, I don't think that there's a lot of constructive discourse about what it means to decenter men. Au contraire, everyone talks about communes. There's so much discourse about communes and what it means
talk
to
a lot
buy
about
a
it.
street, a house in the street with your friends when you get older. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they talk a lot about it, but like, I want to see it. I want to see some of this happen. I don't want it to just be a conversation that happens online.
You're talking to a woman in a polycule, so.
Yeah, again, Brianna, you are, I'm just going out on a limb. You're relatively upper middle class woman in New York City, right? You ever notice how, and there's a whole industry, there's like a whole bouquet of tricks and little scams they pull to make this work, right? But you ever notice how the burgers and commercials are just phenomenally more visually appealing than the burgers that you unwrap from McDonald's or Burger King or whatever? And it's because the burger that they show you on television is effectively fake food, right? It's like plastic lettuce. The bun is really like some type of clay product. The seeds are some type of other thing. It's not really a sesame seed. Like, almost everything about the burger that they photograph. As a matter of fact, they take a water bottle and they spritz it a little bit so the lettuce can look extra moist as it's dripping off the burger. Like, they show you this incredibly photogenic, mouth water inducing, I want to eat this and die right now type of burger, right? But the burger that the average person gets from your average fast food restaurant looks nothing like that, right? Brianna Greyjoy is the television burger of polycules. That's really what she is. She is the TV, the unstoppable burger of polycules, right? It looks great. If everything in your life goes perfect leading up to this moment, then this is kind of what you could have, right? Bacon, lesbian, and tomato is hilarious. But that's basically what, she's kind of like giving as this false impression, where in reality, most women are going to live in the high crime, high trauma, emotionally unstable, government-sponsored Section 8 relationship polycule. That's what most women are going to have, is the Section 8 polycule. Not this fabulous Madison Avenue bullshit. No. Most women are never going to get a polycule that is as great as Brianna Greyjoy. Brianna Greyjoy, remember when they added a black girl to Friends? Remember that? You guys remember Aisha Tyler? That's what Brianna Greyjoy represents right now. Brianna Greyjoy is kind of like the black girl on Friends. Like, and most of these broads will never, they're not even going to have living single. You're not going to be like Regine and Queen Latifah and them. But Brianna Greyjoy is giving off this impression that, we're not just living single. We can also be friends too. Like you're selling all of the television imagery, and it's not going to work. Most of you bitches are going to get a government polycule like the Tennessee Valley Commission used to do back in the day before America got all woke and shit. All right? Bunk beds, bitches. That's what you're going to get. You're going to get bunk beds and government cheese.
I'm living my gospel here. And
I love that for you.
Again, I live in an apartment building where we've all become friends, is what I mean by that. And it's fantastic.
I want the women only communes so badly. I think that sounds.
Oh, there's men.
So
shout out to the men in the in the polycule. I don't mean to shut you guys out. You're an integral part.
No, but I'm talking like of the people who are really.
Those men in the polycule are barely men. They're like the unsullied. They're an army of dickless men in the polycule. Bunch of liberal chuds and shit. Like, no. The polycule is basically her version of the longhouse. When she describes the polycule and she says it all teasing, well, shout out to the men in the polycule. It's the men of the longhouse. You're here for physical and emotional labor, and the occasional spawning of offspring. But none of you are actual men by any historical traditional definition.
Hardcore in their decentering of men to where they, I like in kind of like a second wave feminist way where they're like, they want a women's only commune. Like absolutely more power to you. Like, let's have that be a real world conversation rather than, just an online fantasy. And that's really where it comes down to for me. Like if reading something that has, a hetero pessimistic tone to it makes you feel like you're free now, be free, go be free. Like stop spending your time on the internet, being angry about men.
Stop scaring the bros. Women are literally online begging other women to stop scaring the bros. You guys remember that? Every now and then, somebody on YouTube would be like, oh, stop scaring the hoes. That's what I get accused of, low key. Nobody says that shit as cleverly as that, but that's basically how people react to me. When I say something provocative, women shouldn't be voting. Welfare is bad. People act like I'm scaring the hoes, but in reality, women are scaring the bros. Like, stop scaring the bros. Kid, don't you want to be happily married one day? Don't you want to have all your children by the same guy? Don't you want a man to work hard and die one day and leave you all of his shit? Right? You're scaring the bros, God damn it. Stop scaring the bros.
If you don't have a man, you ain't nothing.
Reading something that has, a hetero pessimistic tone to it makes you feel like you're free now. Be free. Go be free. Like stop spending your time on the internet, being angry about men. And I think that's, again, where like a lot of this division and separation comes from, where there's a very big difference between women who are, authentically decentering men or, lamenting their lived experiences as a way of like blowing off steam in dating, but are still, still giving this all their best shot. And then people who,
right, you think all this online bullshit is just, it's just cute, teehee, but in reality, men are getting a view of women that was literally impossible up until the modern internet age. Men are getting so many negative images and negative messaging in regards to women that it's just destroying what we used to call like the feminine mystique, right? There is no more feminine mystique. There's just a bunch of raggedy bitches and a handful of women that you might possibly try to make it work with.
Good women are dead. Evil bitches, rise up!
Are kind of getting very wrapped up into an internet subculture of hate that, again, the hate might not have as much, consequence to the men that they're hating, but like, it's not making these women actually feel good and be more liberated and be happier. It's making them spend more time online.
Damn, I was all muted up. I'm glad I caught that. Do me a favor, guys. Shout out to everybody watching the show. If you enjoy what we do over here on this channel, like, share, and subscribe. And also, don't forget to hit me on Venmo at The Conservative. And also, you can support the show by clicking the link in the chat. Catch me over on buymeacoffee.com. But appreciate you guys watching. The easiest way to support is to hit the like button, though.
It's so tough. It's so tough. It's tough. Why is it tough? Why? I know that it sounds like I'm willing to basically let the women off the hook. I hear that. I'm self-aware. And I think the reason is because, again, I'm around women all the time and I talk to them and I see them kvetching a little bit in the chat and then saying, let's get dressed and go and watch some World Cup games and see if we can meet anybody.
Damn. They stalking the World Cup games now. The men aren't hunting you. You got to hunt the men.
And just like Ned Stark said at the beginning,
winter is coming.
Winter is always coming.
Around women all the time. And I talk to them and I see them kvetching a little bit in the chat and then saying, let's get dressed and go and watch some World Cup games and see if we can meet anybody offline. Right?
Yeah.
I'm seeing them still trying. I'm seeing them self-better. I'm seeing them engage in new hobbies and, picking up late in life creative exploits. I see them having professional success. I see them, getting lash extensions and skin treatments and trying to get better every year and joining run clubs and all this. And I do see some of that from the men in the group as well. I don't mean to, but it's hard for me. And I don't think the men in the group are Andrew Tate either. I think neither of these people are the maximalist caricatures out there. I do think that though I've observed very broadly, a difference where I do think, and I think the studies bear this out, that because of the way that women are socialized, not because of any intrinsic superiority or anything, but because of the way that women are socialized, we are sort of ahead of the curve in terms of figuring out what life is looking like outside of partnership. And
this is another situation of fish being unable to fully describe the water that they swim in. I don't disagree with what Brianna Greyjoy just laid out, right? In a lot of ways, women are like socially more secure than a lot of men, right? But at the same time, on that very same notion, a lot more government and social effort and energy is put into making that very thing true. And they'll never acknowledge that, I am the product of, a collective of efforts to put me in this position. It's, it's like that Obama thing, you didn't build that feminism. We built that for you.
Figuring out what life is looking like outside of partnership and, making friend groups and prioritizing each other as emotional life of your friends and a kind of a stand-in for what a male partner might have once provided. And when I hear my male friends talk about the state of affairs, it does feel more severe, which is an odd thing to even say because socially we're told like it's like social death for a woman to not get married and have kids. And we have phrases like old maid and spinster that have no equivalent among men. But my experience is actually that the women are sort of faring better emotionally, which I have a lot of empathy for the men. Even as I say that I'm so like curious and a little skeptical about why, if they are faring.
You know, having empathy for the men must be really hard for her. And I just want to take this moment to acknowledge that, you know, I know this has to be difficult, but you pulled through and you made it, you lived. But, you know, thank you to Brianna for struggling and surviving, having empathy for men.
Emotionally, which I have a lot of empathy for the men. Even as I say that I'm so like curious and a little skeptical about why, if they are faring so poorly in this, why there isn't more of like, frankly, a lowering of the bar on their end and like a desperation of anything to just like get a woman to be with them, because it feels like there's many who would. And in fact, they're dating ones who want to be with them, but then it's not that woman. And it's like, okay, well, all right.
Yeah, as much as women, and this is really the supreme irony of just the modern world, as much as women are complaining that, you know, men in general are undesirable and undateable and unmarriageable and whatnot, at the same time, those very women, when they do find men that they consider dateable and desirable and marriageable, those men don't want none of these hoes neither. The men that you want don't want you.
I think that, you know, it maybe one of the reasons why right now why it's a little bit more challenging for men to kind of step up and like, you know, become the appealing partner that they need to be is rooted in economics a bit. I think that, you know, with women now, you know, outpacing men in educational attainment and often in, you know, economic attainment, especially in a place like New York, you know, for a young man who doesn't really see much like economic future for himself, you know, educational opportunity for himself, it's a lot harder, I think, to, you know, look out into the landscape of the world and, you know, be like, I'm going to join a run club and that's going to make me a more attractive partner, but also not to let them off the hook either. I think that young men very much need to be doing that. I think that if, you know, if young men are in a position where they're looking at themselves and they're like, well, I'm not going to be this like, you know, highly educated breadwinner that I once thought was like socially expected of me.
No, you can't all be Chad. You know, I'm reminded of that great speech from Fight Club, you know. We all thought we were going to be rock stars and movie stars, but we're not. You know, there is no great war. You know, our great war is internal. You know what I mean? It's like there is just that cold, sobering reality of just the basics of life.
Then, you know, then they need to look at themselves and think about what else they can bring to the table. 100% men need to be doing that a lot more. But I also think that this is a big opportunity for men. And there is some data to say that, like, you know, a lot more marriages of the future are going to be educated women and non-college educated men. But that, you know,
but there will also probably be way less marriages on the whole. And I think that's the unfortunate bite right there. Like, yeah, women are going to be forced, you know, God help them. They're going to be forced to date down socially or economically, but most of them just won't bite the bullet. They just won't bring themselves to do it. It's going to take a lot of social reinforcement to effectively break women from their like biological preternatural desires and shit.
You can be this ideal of like a, you know, a well paid blue collar guy who, you know, has the politics that a woman desires. He cares about himself. He cares about his hygiene and his health and family and friends and all of that. Like,
and notice, yeah, the politics that a woman desires, right? Like, think of think of that for a minute, right? They want the man's mind to be acceptable to the female, which is like, you basically want niggas to be mentally gay, you know. And this is kind of a phrase I've heard, especially like female coaches say this to their you know, female clients. You can't expect your man to be like one of your girlfriends. Like, the things that you expect from your man shouldn't always be similar to what you expect from your female friends, like emotionally. But the women kind of always seem to describe that type of, you know, scenario where, like, you know, we have to have the same politics and shit. Like, no, he has man politics. You have girl politics. That's why we don't want you voting.
Collar a guy who, you know, has the politics that a woman desires. He cares about himself. He cares about his hygiene and his health and family and friends and all of that. Like, this can exist. And like, as a woman, like, you can find that. And as a man, you know, you can be that if you so desire it. It is possible.
So I call this the Tyler Perry fallacy. Because if you're not familiar, a trope in Tyler Perry.
Thank you. Brianna knew right away. It is some bullshit. We all seen this movie before. None of you hoes are gonna get a light-skinned Shamar Moore, right? That's really not how this works.
Films is that there is a woman who has lived an extremely hard life. She typically has kids, and the father of those kids is abusive and horrible. And usually dark skin and bold, but that's another conversation for another podcast. And he's usually very rich and well-educated. And then after getting dogged out and abused in every way, shape, and form, she leaves and goes and stays with her mother or sister somewhere, usually in the South. She leaves the big northern city and goes somewhere else, where she meets an extremely handsome, light-skinned bus driver, etc., played by someone like Shamar Moore in a bad wig, and falls in love. And the implicit lesson is that women are experiencing romantic hardship because they are valuing superficial characteristics like education or money. But there are all these good working class guys to be found. I will say, for one, that if I happened to come upon a bus driver that looked like Shamar Moore, I would be 150% on board.
Now, that's kind of what I was joking about earlier when Brianna made this comment that, you know, when women are out here professing to love men. No, they don't. They love the idea that they could maybe one day be with a Shamar Moore, right? They're all looking for their Christian Grey Shamar Moore, you know, the Tyler Perry rescue me from my Section 8 ghetto drama bullshit nigga. Like, there's just never going to be enough of those guys to go around. And Shamar would never stay with you anyway. But, you know, a girl can dream, right? You know, it's whatever.
And especially if, like, in the Tyler Perry fantasy, he's extremely kind. He accepts my 3 children. You know, he's warm and understanding and supportive. And he is a wonderful chef and all of these other qualities that he's bringing to my life, even if his salary, I mean, bus drivers make a good salary, but even if his salary wasn't what my rich financier exes.
Hey, Cortez, like, listen, these women don't know that Shamar Moore is under 6 foot tall, right? He always looks taller in a Tyler Perry movie, all right? The nigga always looks taller on TV. That's just how that goes. Stop trying to ruin the magic.
This was. But I do think that sometimes comes across as a little bit of like a blame game for women, because I think many women have, when I talk about, I don't want to frame this now at all as lowering the bar, but have been more expansive in whatever they're looking for. Mm-hmm. They are very open and I've had open conversations with them and say, like, I don't expect anybody to earn more than me. I don't expect even them to make as much as me. But there has to be some reason for us to be together. So are they kind? Are they supportive?
Yeah, because those are the things that get you sexually going, right? His kindness and his supportiveness. Ain't no woman ever started dripping because a nigga was kind and supportive. All right. That's just a basic reality. These are the things they say. This is like, you have a nice personality. Like, I don't care about that in reality. Attraction, and this is just a black pill for a lot of people, but it is what it is. Attraction is a lot more based than, is he kind? Is he supportive? Is he gonna respect me? Like, stop lying. Why you gotta lie, Craig?
To make as much as me. But there has to be some reason for us to be together. So are they kind? Are they supportive? Do they seem to like me? Do they listen to me? Do they respect me? Is there not going to be a jockeying for power because of insecurities that are bred because of the difference in our earning power? Mm-hmm. And when the answers to those questions are no, it gets framed as you won't date someone who makes less than you.
And I think this is a great place to end it. They've almost wrapped up this conversation, but I think we've kind of got the broad strokes of what these girls are talking about here. That's like 90-ish% of their conversation. And there might genuinely be no saving these women. We're going to need something that is, the effect of a nuclear holocaust or a meteor or something. Like there's no stopping this train. But at the very least, the women are starting to get nervous. Progress, I suppose, or whatever. But shout out to everybody watching the show. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe as we pull up out of here. Let me know in the comment section, what do you think about modern women, these modern leftist liberal women, and this new hetero pessimism? And while we're on the subject too, because this is another reason why I got to get out of here. Shout out to hetero optimism. Keep hope alive, right? Keep hope alive. You never know. You never know. About to go get me a plate of food. Somebody just cooked for me. She mad at me right now, but she still made me some food because that's what hetero optimism gets you, right? Keep hope alive, goddammit. Don't let these urban polycule bitches get you all hetero pessimistic or whatever the hell they be talking about. This shit don't make no goddamn sense, but we out of here, y'all. Thanks for watching.
Aspiring to be patriarchs like what white men have, that isn't freedom. That isn't going to help anybody. It's certainly not going to help black people.
It's done. It's done. It's done. It's done. It's done. It's done.